Leo didn't have to ask the students twice. They both quickly followed Leo closely behind as the three of them ran out of the town and into the tunnel, not once looking back. But his strange actions made Quinn wonder. It was the first time that he saw his teacher running away from a confrontation. Up to this point, his teacher had always been someone that seemed unreachable, a force too strong to even imagine its real strength. Even when facing the Dalki, he had never acted like this. Whatever it was, it must have been immensely strong to frighten him like that. But if something was that powerful down here, then why didn't Quinn or the others come across it? After thinking about the possibilities of what could have happened, one thing struck his mind. No, it can't be. We looked around the whole tower. The tower they had just left was known as a vampire's tomb. And judging by the site of the building and what was left behind, it was a powerful one. Didn't you say a vampire would need the blood of one of its family members? It can't wake up, right? Quinn asked the system, but it had chosen to remain silent. Answer me, Quinn snapped in his mind. This time he was insistent and wanted an answer. Sorry, the system replied. I was just thinking about the possibilities, but perhaps there was a chance we did wake it up. But how? Quinn replied. The only thing I can think of is the blood crystal. Remember how I said a blood crystal was quite rare? Well, that's because a blood crystal is harvested from a vampire's body itself. Just like how the beasts contain a crystal inside their bodies, vampires do too. Creating weapons from these things became a taboo. It was a practice that quickly became outlawed. The blood crystals weren't illegal, but intentionally harvesting one from a body was. Of course, we don't entirely know what is inside the blood crystal, but the first part of the process to use it as a raw material to create a weapon is to melt the crystal down. At the right temperature, the crystal will start melting and turning into a blood-like substance. I'm afraid there is a chance that when you inserted the crystal into the podium, it might have started that process and woken up whatever vampire was deep in its sleep. Why didn't you say something earlier then? Quinn complained. I thought the same as you at the time, that the crystal would help you get the weapon. You see, when a vampire goes into eternal slumber, it does so out of its own choice. In a way, it is a vampire saying it is done with the current world and is moving on. However, their bodies are usually kept at their family base or castle. This way, if they ever needed to call on those in times of need, they could. When I saw that there were no vampires in this area, or even any inside the tower, I assumed that the vampire must have chosen to pass on. Some tombs often set trials for their family members, with traps and tasks. Once these were completed, they would pass on their treasures to the next generation. I thought that this person was just doing the same. The three of them had finally left the town. They had gone through one of the tunnels into an open area with several different pathways. The look on Leo's face looked a lot better. Once he traveled through the tunnel, he no longer sensed the strange force. This was because of his ability. It was strong, but he could only see the area he was in. As soon as he entered the town, his view widened, and he could see everything. There was one thing that was troubling him greatly, though. The aura that he had sensed was the same as both Quinn and Fex. Still, Leo didn't want to take any chances in finding out whether this person was friendly or not. Just because they had the same aura as the two students didn't mean they were close. It was easy for Leo to select the path back, as he remembered which direction he had entered from, and he led the two students out. Finally, they were about to leave the strange city and everything that had been found behind. While traveling through the tunnel, it started to slightly tilt upward with no end in sight, and they were unsure how long it would take them to get out. While Quinn was still trying to digest everything he had been told earlier, he'd been thinking about the blood crystals, and now he had a few odd questions. If a family member is unable to kill a member, how would that person obtain a blood crystal in the first place? Quinn asked. That is an excellent question. Even though vampires and subspecies are unable to go against their creator, that still doesn't mean they are unable to break the rules. Just like with every family, they had their fair share of troublemakers. One could always ask another family to do the job for them, but it would leave a sour taste in the mouth and would often cause grudges between friends and such if this were to happen. As such, a special group was created, one outside of the 13 families. These were called the Punishers. Their duty was strictly to uphold the vampire laws that were created by the 13 vampire leaders and the king. They were separated from the others. They didn't make friends with any of the 13 and didn't interact with them other than to bring down harsh punishments. These Punishers, they must have been quite strong then, if they had to force these vampire families to follow the laws, Quinn said. Yes, very strong. When the system spoke these words, it seemed to drift off a little. Are they still around? Quinn asked. noticing the system acting strangely when speaking about them. "Unfortunately, that is for you to find out some other time." Quinn had tried pressuring further, as he had done before. If the system gave in once, maybe it could give in again and tell him more information, but he was unsuccessful. The vampire world seemed complicated and strange. It also seemed to have a very long history that he knew nothing about. The system tried to reassure Quinn that it was unlikely that the blood crystal had woken the vampire from its slumber. Some of the events just didn't make sense. Why hand over a blood crystal to a beast if they planned to wake up at a later time? Were they just leaving everything to chance? Although what the system had said seemed possible, Quinn had a strange feeling that they had woken up the vampire. He knew Leo wasn't acting that way for no reason. This time, rather than wanting to find out about it, Quinn just wanted to get away from this place as soon as possible. Finally, the end of the tunnel could be seen, and daylight was shining through. Both Quinn and Fex never thought they would be happy to see the sun, but they truly were. As they both stepped outside, they lifted their arms, covering their eyes from the sensitivity, but also had huge smiles on their faces. Quinn seemed even happier than Fex as he started to jump up and down on the spot. "Are you that happy to be free?" Leo asked, hearing the sound of Quinn jumping up and down. Embarrassed and with a face flushed with red cheeks, Quinn replied, "Yeah, it's just nice to see the sun again." The reason why Quinn was more overjoyed than usual was that, for the first time in a while when stepping into the sun, he didn't feel sick. He didn't feel groggy or weak, and there was no system message. The ring had worked, and now Quinn could live the life he once had without any restrictions. The two boys continued to follow Leo back through the forest. There were still many beasts in the forest, but thanks to Leo's ability, they were able to avoid all of them and select the safest path heading back to the shelter. Eventually, they arrived where all the remaining students were. They were staying in the shelter, in the large open space on the ground. The other military staff were taking care of them. "Quinn!" Layla shouted as she got up and ran towards him. As soon as she reached him, she gave him a big old bear hug, squeezing him tightly. "I thought you might have died." "I told you had nothing to worry about," Vorden said, walking closely behind Layla. As she let Quinn go, Vorden gave Quinn a fist bump and also a pat on the shoulder. Looking around, Quinn was also happy to see that everyone in their team was alive, and it looked like Peter was okay. When his eyes met up with Logan's, a big thumbs up was given in his direction. "We need to do something about See You Later," Vorden whispered, as they both noticed she was continuously looking in their group's direction. She refused them and stayed with the other students. "All right, everyone," a soldier shouted. "It's time to gather up. Your Sergeant Leo has an important announcement to make." All the students had gathered in the open field on the shelter. Rest of the soldiers carried on doing what they were doing, but they seemed to be busier than ever before. It looked like they were in a rush or something. Looking around, many students were no longer with them. They had either died from the strange plants or underneath in the underground tunnels, or from the advanced tier beasts from before. The students had a horrified look on their faces, and some of them didn't even know how to feel. They were sitting blankly trying to process the entire incident. Leo walked forward first. Faye and him stood in front of them. Leo took a few steps ahead and announced, "Attention, everyone! We have something important to tell you." A while before, Fex and Quinn had arrived at the shelter. All the students from the other classes had been told to return to the shelter as well. This was an order issued by Faye. Frequently, both Faye and Leo were being called out to help the other groups. It was clear that this wasn't a green portal planet, or at least not one that the first-year students could handle. After Leo had gone after Dell's class and it took longer than usual to return, Faye had decided to make the executive decision to call back all of the students to the shelter. The mission was an important one, and she knew her superiors wouldn't accept this as an excuse, especially after just one day. Instead, to minimize the risk, the plan was to go as one large group, while both Faye and Leo would guide them, rather than split them up via their homeroom classes. They would cover less ground this way, and the expedition would be a lot slower, but it would also be safer this way. Some of the students were annoyed. Sure, they ran into trouble now and again, but in the end, none of them died. Only the weak ones had been injured. They felt like it was better to get rid of the baggage they were carrying. Why not just allow the vulnerable students to return while the stronger ones continue to hunt? All the other classes had now returned, apart from Dell's, and Faye was starting to worry. Where are you, Leo? If it's something you can't even handle, then we need to get off this place as soon as possible. Hey, I see someone moving, a student shouted. A person had stepped through the forest and was now standing on the open dark soil of the shelter. The first person to arrive was Leo, and behind him, all of the students started to follow. As the other group saw Dell's group, sounds of gasps and words of concern were heard. What's happened to them? Do you think they ran into an advanced beast or something? Yeah, right, if they did, it would be a lot worse than this. You have to remember that Dell's class is one of the weakest classes of them all. What the student said wasn't wrong. Dell's class was considered the weakest. With Aaron gone and the only strong one left being Vorden, it was hard for them to place the class above any of the others. Vorden's ability would only allow him to copy their strongest of another class. In the students' eyes, that only made them even, and they still had plenty of other strong students in their classes, apart from one person. Of course, they thought this way because they didn't know how Vorden's ability worked. Soon, the students regretted saying those words as the others started to realize something. At first, they thought that Dell's class had just been more injured than theirs. If they had encountered intermediate beasts and it took Leo a long time to get there, then it would make sense. But a little while after, they noticed that no more students were coming out of the forest. The current size of the class that appeared was a little less than half. Where is everyone? What happened? The students expressed their concern. Not for the other missing students, but they were more worried that if something got to them, they could be next. The students from Dell's class were taken in for further healing as well as to make an official report, while Faye and Leo were to discuss what was to happen next. What happened to them? Faye asked. It looks like they went off trail due to an advanced tier beast, Leo explained. A look of horror appeared on Faye's face as their fears were confirmed. Don't worry, I already dealt with it before even meeting up with the class. The two of them looked over at where Dell was. He was currently barging his way through the injured students and going to the front of the queue. Out of the way, don't you guys know how to respect your superiors and elders? It was only because of me that you guys managed to live in the first place. And this is how you treat me. Although Leo couldn't see his actions, hearing his words made him feel sick. That man doesn't deserve to be a teacher, Leo said, clenching his fist. This should be fun, Faye thought. She knew Leo due to his feats during the war, but hadn't seen him in combat much. After hearing how easily he dealt with the Dalki, she knew the rumors had to be true. Any chance to watch someone so significant in combat was a good opportunity for her to learn, especially since she also primarily used a sword as her weapon. As Leo took another step forward, he suddenly stopped. Before anyone else, he could hear the sound of the leaves ruffling from behind. Looks like we finally made it, Andy said as he appeared out of the forest. The group of travelers had arrived, but they weren't alone. They also brought back Vorden, Sia, Layla, Peter, and Logan. Inside the tunnels, Logan had managed to regroup quickly with the travelers once his scanner was working. As an excuse for why Logan had committed his actions, he simply said that he was too afraid after seeing the students dead, and thought that a beast was inside with them. Although Andre didn't quite buy it, he decided to let it slide. The students were the military's problem, not his. Faye and Leo hadn't quite told the students what had happened to Dell's class. The students who had survived were still busy being interviewed and were away from the other students, so they still had yet to hear from the other students what happened. After the travelers and students had walked out of the trees and vines, what followed next started to cause alarm in the camp. The large lion-like beast came out as well. "Beast! Beast!" students shouted as they recognized the beast as a powerful-looking one, perhaps at the advanced level. "Calm down!" one of the commanders who was looking after the students shouted. "That beast will do us no harm. It belongs to the Bree family." After hearing that name, the students quickly began to calm down. By hearing the name, they felt safe, as the Brees were one of the Big Fours, and their powers were known quite wide. The ability to control beasts. Seeing the stripes on both Faye and Leo's sides, Andre knew straight away that they were the highest commanding officers in this shelter. He approached the two of them and saluted at them out of respect. Faye did the same back, but Leo had chosen not to do anything. "Leo, I know you can't see, but this is someone from the Bree family, and they just saluted you," Faye whispered. "Oh, I know, but one must earn respect. I do not know who this man is. I see no reason to show respect to someone just because they carry a certain name," Leo replied loudly, knowing that he could be heard. "I agree wholeheartedly," Andre replied, "which is why I chose to keep my name secret from most. Unfortunately, my ability is a dead giveaway. Anyway, I believe these students are yours?" Andre said as he opened up his palm, telling the students to go over to the other side. Sia had the biggest smile on her face as she ran forward toward the shelter and the other students, while the others decided to remain, hoping to hear the conversation between these two powerhouses. "Thank you," Leo replied. "Would you mind telling me where you found them? Perhaps I will be able to search for others in the same area. You have done enough, so there is no need for you to go out of your way," Leo said. Andre and Andy both looked at each other. They had suspected that something like this would happen, bringing back the students. In the end, they had already made their decision before coming here. "There is something we must inform you about," Andy said as he stepped forward and handed over a scanner to Faye. They revealed information that they had kept secret from the military, the fact that they had discovered an underground town. Not only that, but it seemed like it was made from a Dalki structure. They made excuses while explaining, stating that they knew the place was abandoned and had been taken over by beasts, which is why they decided not to inform or trouble the military with this information just yet. But both Faye and Leo knew there must have been a deeper reason for doing something like this. "Leo, both Quinn and Fex, they're still down there," Vorden said. Logan then handed over the altered scanner he had created to Faye as well. It displayed the information he had found. Most of the students who were taken by the plan seems to have passed away. "There is still a chance that there are others, but I'm sure both Quinn and Fex are still alive," Logan explained. Standing by Leo's side, Faye was slowly boiling up at what she had just heard from the travelers. You... I can't believe you were hiding this from us. Do you know that if you had given this information to us beforehand, the students would never have been sent to a planet like this in the first place? Because of you, students died." Before she even knew it, her fist was already flying toward Andy's face. At the same time, she felt a slash going towards her arm. Quickly pulling it back, she looked at her hand and could see it was still intact. "A vision?" she said. "Don't be too rash," Leo said, but at the same time, he too had his hand on the hilt of his sword. Vorden and the others were prepared for a clash between the travelers and the sergeants. They were ready to help Leo wherever they could. Other than helping them find an exit, the travelers hadn't helped them much. In the end, Quinn was the one who killed the beast. Also, they still remembered how much in debt they were to Leo for saving them from the Dalki. Every one of the students, including the other soldiers, silently watched from the sideline. They were too afraid to get involved. If they did, it could cause trouble, due to the relations one of the Big Four had with the military. The pressure emitting from the two groups was immense. One wrong word or action might make the already fearsome looming presence break out and swallow them whole. In the case of someone like Peter and Vorden, they were able to handle the pressure that coiled around them. However, for Layla and even Logan, it felt like they were about to be consumed by the dangerous energy that was swirling around them. It was only waiting to be unleashed. "Are they really going to clash?" The students on the side asked one another, and some of them began to get anxious about a fight breaking out. "It would be silly if they did," another student sneered, shaking their head. "After all, this is such a small thing. No one would be willing to start a war between a few missing students." However, they were unaware of what Leo thought. He was a simple man. Rather than thinking about the bigger picture of what his actions would lead to, he thought it was best to do what was right in the current situation. As things came to him later, he would continue to deal with them. This was how he was always and continued to be. Right now, the people in front of him had put the students he was responsible for in danger. In the past, Leo was a different man, and he did think about things, perhaps too much, to the point where those around them suffered because of it. "I won't let that happen again," Leo thought. Although the others thought Leo wouldn't do something, Vorden managed to catch a glimpse of Leo's thoughts. He could see his fingers twitching slightly as he held the hilt. "He's ready to attack at any moment." After sharing Leo's powers and interacting with him during theory classes, Vorden felt like he could understand him a bit more. He tried thinking of a way to perhaps calm Leo down. The world didn't need a civil war right now. In the past, there were several civil wars before True Dream came along. There were rumors that the Dalki were keeping an eye on the humans, ready to attack at their weakest point if something similar were to happen again. Perhaps the Dalki would attack even sooner than they predicted. Leo, when we were down there, there was an incredibly strong beast. For now I think Quinn and Fex are safe, but I don't know how long they will survive. They need help now, Vorden said. After hearing these words, Leo's grip around his hilt weakened. It worked. He stood up straight and carried on walking past the group. As he walked, he purposely barged into Andre's shoulder. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Can't you at least show some respect? We saved your students. We didn't have to do that, and we could have kept the whole thing a secret, Andy shouted. Leo then pointed toward his eyes and opened them up. Where the pupils should have been black, it looked as if his entire eyeball was a tint of gray. There was no color. I'm sorry, but I'm blind. You see, I didn't know he was standing there. Faye, I will leave it up to you to do what you want with these visitors of ours. Whatever you choose, I will back it up when we return to the base. With that, Leo continued to walk into the forest while also carefully stepping his feet over a large root going across the floor. Nearly tripped over that one, he said, whistling away into the forest. By this point, Faye had already calmed down. Doing or saying anything would be a waste of breath, so she decided to take a political stance instead, doing what was best for both groups. Thank you for informing us. Please, in the future, do inform us sooner. This way we can avoid any future problems. Andre bowed down to her before leaving with his group, with a sour taste in their mouths from what they had just experienced. While Vorden and the others were revealed, all they needed to do now was wait, hoping Fex and Quinn could return safely. While walking back to the others, Vorden thought about what just happened. When he first joined the military, it seemed like they didn't care about what happened to the weaker students. They allowed fights to go on without intervening, and it was almost as if the fights were encouraged to happen. Even with the whole Duke and Peter situation, it seemed like they were purposely trying to cause friction and division between those that were weaker and stronger in the school. This did happen in the outside world naturally, and in school before it. However, the divide never seemed to be as big as it was in the military school. After hearing not only Leo's reaction but Faye's reaction as well, to the students in distress and his own thoughts. Perhaps the whole military wasn't like this. Or there was also the option that it was more because of the ones that were in charge. Their connection seemed oddly close to the True Dream family, more than they should have been. After waiting for an hour, Leo finally returned, and this time he wasn't alone. By his side were both Fex and Quinn. Layla had run up to greet them, and the others were happy to see them as well. By now, all of the students from Dell's class had been checked. They were now allowed to spend time with the other classes, but news of what happened to the class while they were out started to spread, and the tension was felt in the air. The reality of how dangerous this expedition was finally hit them. Friends and students they had talked to a few hours ago in the morning were nowhere to be seen, and they would never be able to talk to them again. Leo and Faye were busy discussing what to do next. Although they were of the same rank, Faye never felt that way, and she decided she would agree with whatever Leo had decided. I've made my decision, Leo said. I'm going to cancel the expedition and return to the academy. Are you sure? Faye replied. It's only been one day, and not much ground has been covered. Paul won't be happy with the decision. Can't we just travel as one group and protect the kids? Judging from what the travelers told us, the Dalkey settlement seems to be abandoned. No, Leo replied immediately. When I went down there, I could sense it. There is still something there, and it's at least the power of a four-spiked Dalkey. Hearing this, Faye's eyes nearly popped out of her skull. A shiver was sent down her whole spine, and her hair was left standing on top of her arm. We would need at least one of the generals here to try to deal with something like that, and even then, I don't think they would be much of a match, Leo explained. I understand. If we explain this to Paul, they should understand. They might even remove every one of the planets and classify them as red portal planets until further notice, Faye replied. She had misinterpreted Leo's words. Leo had said there was something down there that had the same power as a four-spiked Dalkey. But she had taken this to mean there was a four-spiked Dalkey. Only Leo knew the truth, that the energy that was emitting from the being was similar to both Fex and Quinn. As Leo looked over at the two students, a thought soon planted itself in his head. Is there an actual threat right underneath our noses that is probably far larger than the Dalkey? All the students had been covered on the muddy open soil area of the shelter, which stood just before the forest. Leo had told all of them there would be an announcement to be made. I'm sure by now you have all heard of this news that has happened in Dell's class. Because of this, we have decided to cancel the expedition and head back to the school," said Leo. After hearing the news, some of the students felt a weight lifted off their shoulders. No longer were they in danger and had thoughts of meeting such things. The ones that were part of Dell's class were even more overjoyed. Still, this feeling of relief wasn't shared at all by everyone in the crowd. Those who had done well on the test so far and had run into no trouble started to voice their concern. "What?" a student complained as they looked around for support. "But it's only been one day. That doesn't make any sense. Why should they go back?" "Stop being so selfish," another shouted back at them. It seemed like two camps had emerged, those that wanted to leave and those that wanted to stay. "Enough!" Leo shouted in a loud, booming voice. His voice was projected so loudly that some of the students felt like their eardrums would shatter. They wondered how a man so small was able to produce such a loud sound. The chatter had stopped, but a single student still had his hand up. "Yes, young one," Leo said. "I don't mind having to go back early, but I do have a question. What does this mean for our assessment? Who got the top grade, and how will our scores be divided?" the student asked politely. "Your grades will be decided by how well you have done so far. In the past, usually those that performed well on the first day would continue to perform well through the test. I know this might not be fair, but we will consider this based on your performance in future assessments and adjust your result accordingly. As for Dell's class, they will have an exemption due to the special circumstances they faced and will be tested at some other time. Now, I suppose that at these types of events, we always like to promote those who did their best so that other students know who to look up to as role models. I shall decide the winners right now then." After hearing Leo say this, many of the students that had done well on the assessment so far were starting to get excited. They would straighten out their clothes and make sure their hair was ready, as they were to be called up to the front. Faye walked over to where Leo was standing and tried to hand him over a clipboard with the scores of all the students' points that they had received from the scanner. Instead of taking the clipboard, Leo pushed it away and shook his head. "There's no need," Leo said, and glanced towards the crowd of awaiting students. "The winners are as follows. So will the following students please come to the front? Vorden Blade, Layla Monroe, Sia Green, P.O. Blank, Fex Seg, Logan Green, and finally, Quinn Talon." As soon as the names were called out and announced, an uproar began to erupt among the students. Why hadn't they been the ones to be called? The names were so unfamiliar to them. Apart from Vorden, the rest of the names that had been read were complete mysteries to the other students. Although Logan was a high-level user, he rarely ever visited the classes, so there weren't many that knew what he looked like apart from the ones that were in his class. But even the ones that were in Logan's team were confused as to why his name was called out and not theirs, especially since Logan had gone missing for most of the expedition. However, the students weren't the only ones that seemed confused by their names that had been called out, but so were Quinn and the others. They hardly had the time to scan anything, and even when Peter was underground, he didn't use the scanner because it didn't work while they were down there. "How did they get the top marks? Our group managed to scan around 15 different plants and 3 new beasts. Are they saying they scanned more than that?" a student complained with a frown. "They must have done that, otherwise why were they called up?" another replied. But for the students that were part of Dell's class, they knew that Quinn and the others didn't have much of an opportunity to do anything. Still, they decided to remain quiet. Many of them remembered Quinn's brave actions in saving some of the students from the advanced tier beasts and bringing them to their side. Even though there weren't any points awarded for this, they felt like whatever reward his group was going to get, they deserved it. However, there was one person in Dell's class that didn't feel the same way, and that was the teacher, Dell himself. He still felt a grudge towards these two, especially after what had happened while they were out. Dell was even surprised that the two of them were still alive. "That's impossible! There must be some type of mistake or some cheating going on," Dell remarked loudly. "Those students, I checked the scores on their scanner, and not only that, they had 50 points deducted from their team due to an incident that involved breaking one of my other pupils' arms." Dell then quickly looked around for the student who had suffered the arm break, but he was nowhere to be seen. He quickly realized that the student was one of the ones that had been killed on the expedition. Still, his words were just enough for the students to rile up their anger once again. "Hey, I think I recognize him. I always see him in Leo's class. They often spar with each other," a student said. "This is so unfair. There's no other way to explain this. It has to be favoritism." The group of students that were voicing their concerns started to grow, and now the ones that supported Quinn and the others were starting to take a step back as they quickly became the minority. "Enough!" Leo slammed his sheathed blade into the ground, and a small little vibration was felt on the ground. "The students that have been called, please come to the front. If I hear another word from anyone—" Leo didn't finish his sentence, but they knew he didn't have to. The students had been called and arrived at the front, but instead of looks of admiration and jealousy, they were all stared down with looks of hatred. Sia, who still didn't feel part of the group, was hating every bit of it. The only plus side to this whole thing was that they would come out of this assessment with a top grade, which would do well for her future. Seeing that the students' anger still hadn't been quelled, Faye herself decided to take some action, based on some information she had found out earlier. "Listen up, all of you. There's a reason why these students here have been selected as the winners of today's event." She rummaged through the crate for scanners that had accumulated behind them until she found one in particular. "This scanner here is from Logan, a student. At the time, each of these students had discovered something worth a lot more points than any beast or plant would ever be." After pressing a button on the scanner, a 3D holographic model appeared from the scanner. It showed a recreation of the town that Logan had managed to get on his scanner, the one he had made before entering the tunnels below. "As you can all see, this right here is a Dalki base. It looks like they had arrived on this planet before us. This is the reason why we are leaving, not just because there are some powerful beasts on this planet." Everyone understood that. No longer did the students who were opposed to leaving complain that they, too, wanted to get off this planet as soon as possible. Memories and thoughts went back to situations they would often hear about on TV and the Internet. Cases of humans and Dalki interactions on other planets. When this happens, a fight would break out, and one side would be obliterated. The problem was that a single planet was never enough for either side to reignite the war once again. So one side would have to just grit their teeth and bear it. "If it weren't for these students discovering such a place, then perhaps none of us would be left standing," Leo said. With no more complaints, the students willingly grabbed their belongings and were prepared to head back to the school once again. It now made sense to the students why the shelter seemed to be on such high alert. It was because the soldiers were getting ready to move out. After all their belongings had been gathered, several portals had been pulled out and placed on the ground. While looking around, Quinn noticed that the soldiers were busy gathering their things. The same couldn't be said for the civilians who lived in the treetop homes. They stood there with worried looks on their faces, peeking from above. "Why aren't they packing their things?" Quinn asked. "What do you mean? These people have nowhere to go," Layla replied. "They probably spent all the money they had to move here. Even if the military did allow them to use the teleporters and head back to Earth, they would only be made homeless with no shelter or way to earn credits." "But if the soldiers leave this place, then there will be no one to protect them from beast attacks," Quinn replied. Layla remained silent when Quinn said this, and Vorden simply placed his hand on his shoulder. They were both aware of the fate of these people. While Quinn was a little naive, the government had helped him when his parents disappeared, so why couldn't they help them as well, he thought. He thought this situation was stranger and stranger, but more than anything, he was deeply concerned for the people above. Not only were there adults present, but also children. While the students walked through the teleporters, a young girl who looked only around the age of 5 started to wave her hand goodbye to the students, unaware of what was happening. "This world needs to change. The people at the top need to come crumbling down, and when I'm strong enough, I'll come back for you," Quinn said, although he was aware that by that time it would probably be too late. Deep underground in the abandoned town, a strange man was still standing on the top floor. He had been standing there for a while now as he waited for his body to wake up. He was unaware of how long he had been out. Still, it would take some time for his body's functions to return to what they once were. "I don't know why it's a vampire's tradition to put one in one of those cylinders completely when one is to go into eternal sleep. They could at least allow for a set of clothes to be left behind," the man said, as he seemed deeply concerned by this matter. "I can't just go out and greet the people outside like this. They'll think I've gone mad, or madder might be the correct term." He said this as he began to laugh aloud at his own words. "Ha ha! Didn't I leave some basic treasure of mine behind? I believe it was a set of armor. However, whoever entered the tower might have taken a vital piece,
I did leave it there as a reward. Let's just hope they didn't choose the area that covers the crown jewels."
As the man walked down the spiraling staircase, he continued to pace himself sloppily while holding his chained sword in his right hand. Eventually, he had reached the platform where another room was located in the center part of the tower. When entering the room, he immediately saw that 5 metallic cylinders were present.
"Looks like someone took an item. Well, that's fine. They did wake me up after all."
As the man walked over to the podium, which wasn't encased in a metallic cylinder, as he looked down, he blinked and raised a brow.
"Now, out of all the items available for them to get, why on earth would they choose to take the ring?"
the man thought to himself, rather confused. Inside the dimly lit room, with the torches of flames flickering, the man stood there wondering why anyone would choose to take the ring. Out of all the items that he had left behind, it seemed strange. Any experienced vampire at first glance could tell that it was the weakest of the items that had been left, and even the least valuable.
Maybe it had been a mistake, the man thought.
Whatever it was, for now the man was thankful, since he needed a new set of clothing. Once, he changed and found the person who had woken him up. He would allow whoever had the ring to exchange it for something else, he thought. He then walked over to the other 5 podiums that were covered in the strange metal casing. As he placed his fingertips on the cold outside, in an instant they seemed to react and started to vibrate. Each one of them went back into the ground, revealing the pieces of armor that were once there. After strapping all the armor on, the helmet allowed most of his face to be seen. It had 2 spiraling red horns on top, with a thin piece of metal that went down to the nose.
"This will have to do for now. Let's just hope I wasn't woken up in the middle of a war. Perhaps that's why the person left in a hurry after waking me up," the man thought.
He continued to go down the spiraling staircase, but he found everything a bit strange. If a war was going on, why wasn't he hearing anything outside? Soon, though, he had his answer. When stepping outside, he had expected one of 2 things. A parade of people would be there to welcome him back, or a big fight would be taking place. But he saw neither of those things. Instead, all that was left was an abandoned town. When stepping out, he could feel that there was no sign of any others like him in the area, just beasts. He didn't give up, though.
"Maybe my senses are yet to wake up,"
he told himself as he continued to look around at the buildings nearby. He searched and searched, but there was nothing. A few beasts that sensed he was near scurried away, not wanting anything to do with the new presence. Finally, he came across something that looked a little interesting. It was a strange human-sized beast that looked like it had been killed not too long ago. The reason why he found it interesting, though, was that he could sense strange energy from it similar to his own.
Now why would a blood crystal have been left behind with a beast?
Seeing this, he felt the same energy as the beast. He thought that maybe his awakening was an accident. Somehow the blood crystal he had left behind with one of his family members had ended up in the hands of this beast. From the looks of the area, it had been abandoned long ago, but he still had no clue how long he had been asleep for. Someone might have killed the beast, taken the crystal, and then entered the tower, unaware of everything that was happening. That would also explain why they would choose to take the ring if they had no clue what the other items did.
"Perhaps my stinginess paid off in the end," he said, laughing to himself.
Before going into eternal sleep, his closest aide Stephen had asked him to leave behind certain treasures. They had also asked him to set up trials in the tower, but the man was too lazy for that. When picking out items, he chose the ones that he felt were the easiest to replace. Stephen was confused by his actions. If he was going into eternal sleep anyway, it would be best to leave his best equipment for those of the next generation. But once a cheapskate, always a cheapskate. Stephen couldn't change his nature. Thinking back on how it might be possible, there was also the chance that someone, not a part of his family, or a different species, had obtained the blood crystal. He was now glad he hadn't left out any powerful items. Otherwise, it could have caused trouble.
"Well, no use thinking about it now," the man said as he stretched his arms. "Before I choose to go back to sleep, I'm quite curious about what happened to everyone here, and I guess there's only one way to find out."
The man continued to walk out of the town into the tunnels. The sword was now wrapped around his back, using the chains to hold it onto his chest piece of armor. It seemed like he had picked a tunnel at random when walking. Still, after choosing one path, it carried on for a while until eventually sunlight could be seen at the end. A step was taken out of the tunnel and into the sunlight. The man was surrounded by nature, and the rays of sunlight shot through the trees and leaves. They were touching both the skin on his hands and the open area on his face. However, unlike Quinn and Fex, there was no reaction to the man.
"My skin's a little itchy. It would have been nice to have that ring. Otherwise, I might develop a rash of some sort,"
he complained as he scratched the front of his hand. "Ah!" A scream was suddenly heard coming from his right. Immediately, without thinking about it, he started to dash in the direction of the scream. Moving at an incredible speed, he was able to maneuver around, avoiding the trees and hitting the branches and vines that would block his path. Eventually, he could see a little girl just by a river, but she wasn't alone. A large snake, nearly 4 times the size of the girl, was on her body with its head held high, looking at her. The girl tried to back away, but there was nowhere left for her to go, as the river was behind her and the large black snake in front. The snake dashed with its head leading forward. With nothing else to do, the girl closed her eyes and screamed once more as she felt like her life was over. When no pain was felt, she decided to open her eyes again. The snake was no longer there. It had disappeared entirely, and instead, standing in its place was a man in strange red armor. Seeing the snake had gone, she collapsed onto the floor with her knees hitting the stony, hard ground. "I thought I was going to die," she said, crying.
"It's okay," the man said. "The big snake is gone and won't bother you anymore."
Looking at the girl, he noticed that there were a few cuts on her body. The worst wound was the one on her knee. It was severely scraped, and blood was being drawn from it. The man grabbed her leg and looked at it carefully.
"It looks quite bad, but I should be able to help you with that."
He then spat on both of his hands and started to rub them together. The girl started to cry even louder, seeing the man do these strange actions. "You're a weirdo! I'm going to be killed by a weirdo!" she cried.
No, don't worry. I'm not trying to do anything strange," he replied. "Trust me, my spit is like magic."
He then placed his spit-covered hands on top of the knee, holding it down. The girl felt no pain and waited a few moments, still unsure whether to trust the stranger or not. When the man let go of her knee, the wound had completely disappeared. Looking at it, she was amazed. "Thank you, sir. You must have the ability to heal," she said.
"Ability?"
the man replied, confused. "What's your name?" she asked.
"You can call me Arthur."
Just then, the smile that was on the girl's face only seconds ago dropped. She started pulling on Arthur's arm hard. "Arthur, me and you are friends, right?" Arthur nodded in response. "Then please, you have to help me. My family, everyone here is in trouble. The soldiers, they went away. I don't know why, but they left us all here, and shortly after there was an attack. At first, we managed to stop them, but after killing the first beasts, more started to come." As she spoke these words, she was struggling to breathe, gasping for air in between. Arthur could see this was tough for her. She looked extremely young, barely older than 5. He then picked her up with one hand and brought her close to his chest.
"Tell me where to go."
The girl pointed in a direction, and Arthur immediately moved. It wasn't as quick as before. However, the girl could still feel how fast he was moving, as a breeze similar to when one is riding a bike fast was felt on her face. Every so often, Arthur would stop and ask the girl for directions. She knew roughly where the area was, but wasn't sure, as she had been running away from the beast and had gotten slightly lost. "I'm so sorry, Arthur," the girl said. Sniffing his nose into the air, he could smell it.
"Don't worry, I know where they are."
A sweet smell entered his nose, a scent he remembered vividly. The smell of blood. As usual, the head General Paul had left on one of his expeditions. This meant that the 3 other generals were left to run the military base, including the school, while the others were away. Mike, the oldest and most experienced of the generals, was mainly in charge of running the base and other soldiers when this happened. This was a task usually for the head general, but because he was often away on other work, Mike would be put in charge. What this meant was the remaining 2 generals, Nathan, head of first years, and Duke, head of second years, were in charge of running the school. Inside his office, Nathan had his feet up on his desk and was lying back in his chair. It was the first time he felt this way in a while. With the first year on the outing, there wasn't much for him to do at the moment, and he could finally take a break. "I wish I had this much free time every day," Nathan said. Although he was still concerned about the students, the fact that Leo was with them eased him a little. He was one of the very few people who actually knew Leo's real strength. The probability of the students being on a high-risk planet was low, but even if they were, he was sure Leo could deal with it. Just then a loud knock was heard on his door. "Come in," Nathan shouted. The soldier quickly opened the door and had a panicked look all over his face. "Sir, it's Sergeant Leo. He has sent a message informing us that he will be coming back soon." "What?" Nathan said, jumping out of his chair. "It's only been 1 day." The man gulped before passing on the next bit of information. "That's not all, sir. I think you better take a look at the report he sent. It seems like the whole shelter will be evacuated from the place." Quickly, Nathan read the detailed report that had been written, and his eyes opened wide. If what was in the report was true, he couldn't fault Leo's decision-making. Inside the portal room in the school, multiple medical staff and military personnel were there waiting on standby due to Nathan's orders. The information from the integration at the shelter had been passed on. Most of the students had already been healed at the shelter, but this was just a precautionary measure. Nathan was also standing in the room, nervously tapping his foot away until finally the portal started to flicker. The first person to come through the portal was Leo, and eventually all the students began to follow from behind. The students were led to their class groups, where their teachers would round them up and wait for further instructions. When the last student exited the portal and everyone there had been confirmed present, Nathan gave the command. "Cut the link," Nathan ordered. 2 soldiers immediately ran up to the portal and pressed 2 buttons on either side of the portal. A few seconds later, the orange wavy-like color had disappeared. Looking at the portal through the circle, the other end of the wall could be seen. This was a necessary step to make sure that no beasts or other things would be able to follow them from behind and enter the base. The portal was then quickly taken away, off to the side. It wouldn't be used for student activities, and would only be used once again when the portal color had been changed to red and for stronger soldiers to enter. The students didn't know what was going on, as they waited in the room for the next command. While doing so, Vorden had a heavy thought on his mind as he looked over in the direction of Sia. "Hey, Quinn, we need to do something about Sia," Vorden whispered. "She saw your abilities, and not only that, but she also saw Fex transform into that thing. I don't know why she hasn't told anyone yet, but it's too risky for her to know." Hearing this, Quinn couldn't agree more. It didn't matter why Sia was keeping it a secret. Unlike the others before, she wasn't a friend. "Before you go," Vorden said, as he placed his hand outward and handed something over to Quinn. When looking at what he had just been given, Quinn noticed it looked identical to the earring that Fex was wearing, black in color and with a rectangular shape. "It's that flying bull. It told me to hand it back to Fex. While you're talking to him, you can hand it back." Quinn looked at the item and found it interesting that the bull was able to transform into a small piece of jewelry like this. It made him wonder if he would be able to get something like this. As he walked over to Fex and handed over the earring, he leaned over and started to whisper. He asked, "Hey, Fex, we were just speaking, but do you think you could use your skills on Sia to make her forget about the whole situation?" "I don't think it will be a problem, but I'll be honest with you, it's a lot of information and a lot of things happen. It will be hard to fill in the blanks in her head if I do this. It might even cause her brain to be slightly damaged, removing so many events." Quinn didn't like the sound of that. He despised the thought that he might have to harm people connected to his case in order to keep it hidden. Just because she had the fate of joining Quinn's team, she would now have to suffer for it. When someone did something wrong to him, like the time in the desert, he had no problems, but Sia hadn't directly tried to hurt him. "What do you think?" Quinn asked, hoping for some guidance. "If it was down to me, I would have removed her memories already. It's just too risky, Quinn. I know you by now, and maybe you feel bad for her, but if humans find out about us, then that means the vampires will also find out about us, and I'm more worried about them. They will kill and slaughter every person that knows of this secret to keep it hidden." What Fex said hit Quinn quite hard. Not only would they go after him, but Vorden, Peter, Layla, Aaron, and Leo. It would affect multiple people who had only helped him so far. Quinn clenched his fist, mumbling, "Sometimes we have to sacrifice a few to save many." He hated saying these words, but he needed to convince himself. It felt like what he was about to do right now was no different from what the military was doing. They hadn't even tried to save the people at the shelter they were at. But they had a choice, while Quinn felt like he did not. "Go ahead," Quinn said as he gave the nod. Right now, Sia had departed from the others. She had promised herself that she would keep the others' secrets, but the main reason was that she didn't want to be involved with people like that. A group of students who had way too many secrets. It just smelt like trouble. She didn't like the military that much in the first place, so getting on their good side didn't mean much for her. If she could go through her life without ever having to interact with others again, then she would be happy. The problem was, she couldn't. While deep in thought about what her next move would be, she felt someone walking up from behind. "You," she said, a little startled as she moved back a bit. Still in her head were images of what the student had turned into. Although she was terrified, she quickly took a deep breath and calmed herself down. There was a high chance that Fex just had a transform ability that changed him into a type of muscular creature. Still, she remembered the power and loss of control Fex had back then, and it seemed like the bloodsucker was a lot more frightening than even the king-tier beast they had faced. "Don't worry, you won't be afraid of me anymore," Fex said, as his eyes started to glow red. It was the usual thing, and something Fex had done plenty of times while in school. He just needed to wait for the typical response, as her eyes would start to grow dull and glow a slight red in return. Sia, seeing Fex's eyes change slightly, stepped back. "Hey, what are you trying to do to me?" she shouted. As she did this, a few of the students nearby turned their heads to look at what was going on. "Huh? Why isn't it working? Am I too tired? No, that can't be it," Fex thought. "Is her mind strong?" He didn't quite catch on to what was happening at first, since it was a feeling he wasn't used to, but it was clear that she was able to resist his powers. Seeing that now, others were paying attention to them. Fex quickly turned around. "Sorry, just forget about it," he said as he walked off back to the others. "Did you do it?" Quinn asked, unsure of what had just happened. "No," Fex replied. "She resisted it. It's the first time something like this has happened." "Isn't she only a level 4 ability user?" Quinn thought. The influence skill relied on one's charm skill. Up to this point, Fex's charm had always been higher and stronger than Quinn's. Fex had used his ability on several students before, and that included level 4 ability users. He never thought of the possibility of his influence not working. The problem was, it didn't matter how strong the individual was with their abilities. It was all about how strong their minds were. There were some people Quinn could imagine the influence skill never working on, such as Logan, Vorden, and Leo. These people were too strong-willed. However, when looking at Sia, he didn't feel the same way. Wasn't she just an ordinary student? So why didn't Fex's influence work on her? Hearing the shocking news that Fex had just failed, Quinn was busy pondering what to do. There was always the chance that something like this might happen. Perhaps a high level would see them, and they would be unable to deal with it in the usual way. This thought was always in the back of Quinn's mind. When he thought about it again and again, the ending that played out in his head was always the same. He would have to kill them. It was too risky to leave something open, and while he was still in military school, there was no chance to run away or escape. While looking at Sia, images started to flash through Quinn's mind of the possible ways he could do this, and a certain disturbing image entered his head. One of them was holding Sia in both hands with blood dripping from his mouth, and by her neck there were 2 puncture wounds. "Hey, why don't you try to clear her memory?" Fex said. This suggestion might have seemed out of the blue before, but right now, not so much. Fex had his reasons. After witnessing Quinn fight against the king-tier beast, he knew that his speed was already that of a vampire noble. Fex wasn't sure if Quinn had evolved and gone to the stage of vampire noble just yet, but there was still a chance his charm was stronger than his. Coincidentally, when Fex had made this suggestion, Quinn had thought the same thing. Were his current charm points higher than Fex's? He felt a great increase in speed once his points had reached above 30. If his charm skills didn't work against Sia, there was a good chance that it could still work once his charm skills had reached above 30. It could work, but if it doesn't... Before he could even make a decision, Nathan had already started to make an announcement. "Listen up, everyone," Nathan said as he raised his hand in the air. "There is no need for the students to stay here any longer. Feel free to head back to your rooms, and in the morning, we shall inform you of your schedule next week. We might even send a message out tonight, so keep an eye out for it on your wristwatch. As for all homeroom teachers, I would like you to stay behind for now." As soon as Nathan said those words, the doors to the portal hall opened wide, and the students were heading back to their dorm rooms. They were tired, defeated, and wanted to forget about the experience they had gone through. By then, Sia was already gone. It was now night, and the curfew for the students to stay in their rooms was about to pass. For now, he would have to trust Layla to keep an eye on her until he met up with her the next day. All the students promptly left the room, and the teachers remained, along with the sergeants and Nathan. "First, I would like to tell you that the whole planet has been evacuated of military personnel for now. We will no longer be required to explore the planet, and a special ops unit will be sent in the future to figure out whether the Dalki have already inhabited the place or not," Nathan explained. "Wait, I don't understand," Del said, a little frustrated. "I thought we all left because we knew the Dalki were there." "Our information sources say they might have been chased away, or even something else. The reason why I am saying this is that their base is still full of blue crystals. If the Dalki had taken over the planet already, they would have taken all the crystals with them already." Although Del didn't have any wish to continue the mission alone, he thought they might still have a chance to complete it with Leo and Faye by his side. He knew what the military was like. He had been with them long enough. Because this expedition had been cancelled early, they would soon ask them to go on another one. If they had finished this one, they might have been good for a whole year. "This information would have been passed on to you all later on anyway," Nathan explained. "The real reason why I asked you to stay behind is the upcoming inter-military base event in 2 weeks." "What does that have to do with us?" a female teacher asked. "Usually all the second years take all the places, right?" "Yes, usually that is the case, but this year they have decided to do something different. There are a few strong first-year students from the other military bases that wish to take part in the event. So this year, they have decided that each class must select at least one student for the 3 main events: Ranged Ability Tournament, Fighting Tournament, and Crafting Tournament. You all should have a list ready for me by the end of the week of who you think will participate. Paul has stated that this intermilitary tournament is an important event, so you must select your best. If your students do well, this will reflect well on you, and you will be rewarded for it. Not all of our positions are based on strength, and soon one of our oldest sergeants will be retiring. Does anyone have a list of the current rankings of students?" Hearing what Nathan had just said, Del started to have a slightly worried look on his face. Not only did the students think Del's class was one of the weakest ones, but the teachers did as well, and Del was aware of this. In his head, he was trying to think of just who to pick for the event. A soldier from the side walked up to Nathan and handed him over a tablet. On the tablet was a list of every first-year student with a score beside their name. Well, this is a surprise," Nathan said. "It seems like Del's class has the most top-ranked students currently." Hearing this, his jaw nearly dropped to the floor. He thought, then suddenly, how could it be? He started to remember what had happened. Leo had awarded the group with the most points for the outing. That group belonged to his class. Not only that, but in the last assessment, Quinn and his group didn't do too bad either, scoring around the mid-level. With top scores in one and middle scores in the other, it positioned Quinn's group and teammates relatively high on the current ranking. "I shall be expecting some good things from you," Nathan said as he looked at Del. "Now go get some rest, everyone. I will update you with what is to happen tomorrow." At another military base, it seemed like the group of teachers were having a similar meeting. However, this one was a lot more formal. All the teachers had gathered in a meeting room. There were a total of 10 teachers, including the sergeant, who sat at the head of the table. One of the teachers sat upright, stiff and listening keenly to every word being said. "Does everyone understand?" a relatively large, fat man said at the front. "Yes, sir," Silver replied the quickest, and was the most responsive. "Why can't you guys be more like her?" the man said. "Not only does she always look stunning in the morning, but she works hard, is responsive, and she's the new one. Keep this up." The man then turned off the presentation as he left the meeting room. The other teachers followed, leaving the room one by one, when a male teacher named Justin noticed that Silver still hadn't left her seat. She had remained in the same position throughout the meeting, and even when it was over she remained firm. "Hey, Silver, the meeting's over. Are you coming back?" Justin asked. Silver turned her head, and her silver hair with strands of black was tossed across her face. As Justin saw this, he felt like he was watching one of those shampoo commercials in slow motion. Everything seemed to slow down as he appreciated her beauty. "I'm sorry, my mind was on something else," Silver said, as she stood up from her seat and walked straight past Justin out of the door, ignoring him. "Wait!" Justin called out. "Maybe I can help. Do you need anything?" Silver lifted her hand and wafted it about in the air. "I don't think I would even ask for your help with boiling an egg. Just stick to teaching." As she walked off, her head was still filled with one thought. In the meeting, they mentioned the tournament was coming up. Every single base would travel to Base 1 to participate, the largest military base of them all. Here, she would finally meet the person she was looking for. "I can almost smell you, Fex," she said as she licked her lips.
Hi, Quinn here. Ready to continue the adventure? Click the join button or the link given in the description to join Pocket FM Fantasy's membership and unlock the newly extended episodes of My Vampire System. Happy watching.